You got your slate? Lower clear is correct. 3, 2, 1, and.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a presentation on solar heating in buildings. The title of the talk is New Standard Solar Hydronic Combi Systems, and that's a mouthful, but what that means is we're dealing with solar heating in buildings. We're using hot liquid, that is water-based liquid, to distribute this heat, to collect heat and distribute heat. That's what the word hydronic means. And combi systems are systems that do many things with the same equipment. So for instance, the same equipment will collect and distribute solar heat. The same equipment will accept boiler heat and distribute it using the same equipment. So a combi system is something that that allows multiple heat sources and multiple heat loads in a building, but then using all the same equipment to distribute this heat in the building. The fact that I'm talking about a new standard, this is something new in solar heating in buildings. The new standard is something that we have developed here in northern New Mexico over the past 15 years, and it is, as it says here on this slide, it is modular. That is, we've tried to make things the same and plug together easily. It is integrated. That is, everything to do with the heating system in the building is integrated into one control system. And now, with the onset of the internet and computers, we can now control and monitor these solar heated buildings over the internet. So we have remote control capability that we never had before in solar heated buildings. So our focus is in this talk is on solar hydronics, that is using solar heat to heat liquid, which then heats the building, and using them in combi systems, that is multiple sources of heat and multiple heating loads all tied together. It's good for existing buildings and conventional buildings. So we're not asking you to build a new building or build a building in a different way. We can solar heat the building that you're going to have as long as it has hydronics in it. In other words, it's heated with hot water. It's good for new and retrofit heating systems. If you already have a hydronic hot water boiler system, we can retrofit it to be solar heated. We're only going to talk in this talk about things that are proven, that we know they work because we've done them over and over again and watched them work. So proven things that work is what we're going to talk about here in solar heating. And then we're going to focus a little bit, especially at the end of the talk, on advances and innovations in this field. What I'm talking about is active solar heating, that is solar heating that uses separate collectors, pumps and controls to pump heat around the building. And this type of heating has been popular actually since the 1950s, I'd say, is when they started doing hydronic heating of buildings with solar heat. But in recent years, especially in the last 15 years, we've really tuned in on making it modular, reliable, and controllable. So the last thing I'm going to say here off of this slide is that we've made things standardized and scalable and repeatable. That is, we've made things more plug and play, more the same. Every time you do something, you do it the same way. You can make what we do bigger or smaller without changing the way you design it. And you can mass produce it. If you're in a housing development and you need 100 heating systems, you can make 100 of these heating systems very rapidly without getting bogged down in the design or trying to figure out how to make the solar work. This is plug and play solar, and it's something completely different than it used to be. So let me show you 3 examples. Here's an example of an award-winning solar combi system that was installed in Los Alamos about 5 years ago or so. This building is the recycling center in Los Alamos. And if you drive up the truck route in Los Alamos, you'll drive right past it. It's called the Eco Center. And I designed into this building from the ground up one of these solar hydronic combi systems. That's the new standard. It's a new standard way of doing solar heating. It's built right into this building, and it's been operating in this building for the last 5 or 6 years. And in just the last 2 years, we won an award on this building for upgrading it to the new standard control system that goes along with what I'm going to be presenting today. So this is a good example of a building that's been around for a while, 5 or 6 years, that is completely under control, built to the new standard of solar heating. And the most interesting thing about this building is that the solar heat collectors are mounted vertical on the vertical south wall, almost as if it was a passive solar window. And on the roof, there are these other solar panels that are not glazed. They're just plates of metal with hydronic fluid pumped through them, and they are for cooling. They cool the building at night. This is a new thing that, well, it's actually an old thing that we've made new by controlling it and making it standardized. So in recent years, we've resurrected what we call night sky radiant cooling, and we've been trying it, and it's actually really an interesting alternative to chilling a building using an air conditioner. So that's what these initials here mean, NSRC. That's night sky radiant cooling. And believe it or not, even if you don't have special collectors like this Los Alamos building has for cooling, you can use the collectors that you have, the glazed collectors, the normal solar heat collectors, and if you use them at night under proper control, you can cool your building with your solar collectors. That's called night sky radiant cooling. This is all part of the new standard. Our standard way of controlling heating systems and building heating systems allows you by default to cool your building if you want to with the same collectors. Here's another example of one of these new standard solar hydronic buildings. This is a retirement home that was built near the shore of Abiquiu Lake just about a year ago. And you can see we designed the heating system in this building to have radiant heated floors throughout the building. The radiant heated floors are concrete, but they're well insulated. And we can heat the radiant heated floors with hot liquid pumped through the floors using either propane or solar. And because we put in a new standard heating system, the heating system and the control system just automatically switches back and forth between solar and propane and gives priority to the solar. So this is a new standard building, even though it looks like a typical Santa Fe style stucco home. It's a new standard solar heated house, and it's brand new, and we've been watching it work over the internet using our control system. We can watch everything that happens there, and we can also adjust everything that needs adjusting there if necessary over the internet. So what you can see here is this is the control system that controls the entire heating system in the house: the solar, the propane, the water heater, the warm floors, the room thermostats. Everything go through this box, and this box has a computer in it right there, and that is the secret of controlling the new standard. Is we use software in a computer to control this. So it's no longer done with relays and hand wiring. It's all computer software, and it's all internet compatible. And you can see the other thing about the way we do things in our new standard solar heating systems is we try to make them as compact and as simple and as unobtrusive as possible. So you see here we're using low mounted, what you might call portrait mounted or landscape mounted collectors. That is, the collectors are low so that they don't create a big profile. And you actually have to climb on the roof here to see all the collectors, because the collectors are mounted in such a way that they look kind of like windows or skylights, but they're well hidden. So it takes away that thing that used to be called the ugly factor in solar buildings, where you have collectors that look like square rigger sails sticking up into the breeze. We try to avoid that as much as possible. And on this building, The collectors are very understated. Here's another building. This is the third example I'm going to show you before I start talking about how do we do this new standard. This is a house that, that we retrofitted in Virginia, about a 2-hour drive from Washington, D.C. Yes, it's still cold enough there to require heating, and this is just an ordinary suburban house with radiant heated floors in it, and it already had a boiler heating the floors with warm water, and the boiler runs on fuel oil. And fuel oil is just as expensive to buy as propane is these days. So the homeowner was interested in cutting his fuel oil consumption. So we did a quick analysis. We figured out how many solar collectors he needed. He decided to use the new standard way of plumbing it together. So we cut apart his boiler system in some strategic places and reconnected it together in a standard way so that we could then control it with our standard control. And here it is hanging in his house. This is the control box with the little computer in it. These are the collectors in the backyard, and later landscaping was added so that from the house and from anywhere in the yard, when you look in that direction, all you see is bushes. You don't really see the collectors. That, again, is an important part of the new standard in solar heating, is to make the solar heating so that people like it, so that they don't think it's ugly or disadvantages them in some way. So how do we do it? What is the new standard? The new standard is you design the whole system as if it was one package. You design a standardized piping system, and I'll show you how that's done in a minute. And while you're designing the plumbing for the heating system, the piping, while you're designing that, you're also simultaneously designing the control system. So the controls and the plumbing and all the plumbing components go together. They were designed to work together. And then the last part of this is think about the owner. Think about who lives in the house. No matter who lives in the house, whether they're elderly, they're kids, they're technologically interested people, or people completely uninterested in technology, all kinds of people live in houses. So you want this system to be friendly to all of them. So that's what we mean by fingertip comfort control, is no matter who's in the house, to control their very advanced solar hydronic combi system, the control of it is simply with room thermostats that everybody knows how to use. When you want more heat, you turn it up. When you want less heat, you turn it down. And that is all you need to know about this very advanced and intelligent heating system. If that's all you want to know, that's all you need to know. You turn it up or you turn it down. So it's a standardized way of doing the plumbing for the hot water heating system. It's a control system that always is developed with the heating system, so they're tied together. There's no question that everything that got designed in the plumbing has a way to be controlled. They're designed together. And then the homeowner, all the homeowner needs to know is how to turn up or down a thermostat. That is what we mean by the new standard in solar heating. Here's how we do the plumbing. The new standard in plumbing is making good use of what is known in the plumbing industry as the primary loop. Here is a primary loop that hangs in your boiler room next to your boiler. This thick black line here, you can imagine that it's made out of copper tubing and it has water flowing around in it, and that's the boiler water. That's the water that's heated by the boiler, typically in a normal boiler heating system. The way we adapted to this is we added a second loop out here that has plumbing that goes outdoors. And we put propylene glycol antifreeze in there, usually, although we can also use drain back collectors and use water with a drain back system if that's required. But our typical standard has glycol in the plumbing that runs outdoors. So the collectors are usually outdoors. The collectors will either be ground mounted near the house or be mounted on the roof. And since that is outdoors, that could be in danger of freezing, and that's why we run antifreeze in the plumbing outdoors. So here's how it works. The sun comes up, the collector gets hot, a pump turns on and pumps heat through these collectors. The heat comes out, is pumped around through back indoors to where the main primary loop for the house is. There's a heat exchanger that exchanges the heat from the glycol into the water, and then the control system realizes that there is heat available, decides that it's hot enough to do a real heating job, and turns on a heating job. And so somewhere around this primary loop, a heating job turns on when heat is available. And that job could be to make domestic hot water. And if that's the case, the heat's going from the collector through the heat exchanger into the domestic hot water, and then the cool fluid, as it gives up its heat to the water, flows back to get more heat from the heat exchanger. So you've got two loops, a glycol loop giving heat to the house, and a water loop taking heat from the solar and giving it to something in the house. And you can see that all the things that need heat and all the things that make heat are plugged into this system with only two pipes. Now this is just a block diagram, so I'm not showing you all the pumps and valves and things. I'm just showing you that here's a loop and here's a boiler. The boiler's plugged in with two pipes, literally two T's in the primary loop. The boiler's plugged into the system with two pipes. If you don't have a boiler, you can pull that off and put something else on those two pipes. Like, for instance, a ground source heat pump or some other source of heat could be plugged in there where the boiler goes. So that's part of the modularity, or the plug-and-play part of this, is that you can plug plumbing pieces together into this system with two pipes. So if you have a hot water heater, you plug it in there with two pipes. If you have hot water baseboards that need heat, you plug them in here with two pipes. If you have radiant heated floors, you plug the floor systems in here with two pipes. And you can also heat other things like a pool or a spa. And then outdoors, you can actually use that glycol that's being heated outdoors to heat heating jobs that are outdoors. For instance, an outdoor pool or an outdoor spa or an outdoor ice melt sidewalk or melting the ice off your driveway. We've built systems that have a pool plugged in with two pipes to the glycol loop here. And we've plugged in many ice melt zones, especially in Colorado, where they use ice melt a lot. That plugs in right here. And of course, since the tubing in the sidewalk that melts the ice is outdoors and is in danger of freezing, it has to have glycol in it. So we use the same glycol that we use in the solar collectors for both collecting heat and giving heat out. Distributing heat and collecting heat is done with the same fluid. So that, in a nutshell, is the new standard in hydronic heating. If you follow this standard and you don't deviate from it, you will find that you can plug things in and unplug things as you're designing a system. You can plug things in or unplug them as you're applying this to different buildings. And because you're plugging things in and unplugging them on the same place in the loop every single time, you don't have to redesign it, the plumbing, and you don't have to redesign the controls either. You can just use the same control scheme over and over again and just ignore the things that are not there. So that is our new standard. This standard we've adapted to be easily applicable to buildings up to about 10,000 square feet. But if you have a building larger than 10,000 square feet, then you can just do multiples of these. You can do more and more of them. So for instance, on a big skyscraper that's 10,000 square feet per floor, you could do one controller and one loop, standard loop of plumbing per floor. So it's very adaptable. And in order to make this easy for installers, like mechanical installers, plumbing and heating guys, to make it easy for them to do, we provide a design program on the internet. It's called the /D Computer Design Program, and it's free. Anybody can go and log in and use it to design plumbing systems. And when you use our /D design software over the internet, what you get when you're done inputting just a few things about your heating job is you get a complete plumbing diagram just like this. And it has all the details that the block diagram did not have. It shows you where to put the pump. It shows you where to put spring check valves. It shows you where to put swing check valves. It shows you where to put the T's, the pairs of T's in relationship to one another around the loop. It shows you the order to put them in, where the boiler comes first, the DHW comes second, the floor heating comes third around the loop. It shows you everything you see here. And this is generated by a computer design program that's free that you can use over the internet. One of the interesting things about the way we do this, and we call these, and I refer to this as an innovation, is that if you follow this plan for your hot water plumbing system in your house, it gives you the advantage of either using or bypassing anything in the system simply by turning its pump on and off. So I know that in the past, solar heat system designers have racked their brains on how to connect things together and done some pretty inventive things, but they're very hard to control. If you do it this way, the control is simply, do you want to turn the pump on or off right now? And that's all there is to it. So if you want the boiler to turn on, you turn its pump on, and the boiler controls turn it on, and you deliver heat around the loop from the boiler simply by turning its pump on. And if you want to deliver that heat into the domestic hot water, you turn the domestic hot water heat delivery pump on, and it delivers fluid around the loop and takes the hot fluid from the boiler or the solar into the water heater tank. So we don't have any motorized diverter valves or anything like that. It's just, is the pump on or is the pump off? That's all there is to it. So so here's what we're trying to avoid. This is what I call old school way of doing solar heated buildings. The plumber or the plumbing heating contractor would go to the plumbing warehouse, buy a truckload of parts, drive over there and try to figure out how to put the parts together on the fly in the mechanical room as he did it. This was standard practice back in the day, in the 1980s or so. A lot of solar heating systems were put in just like this, kind of at random, at the whim of the installer. If you follow our system and use our computer-aided design program, you can design a system just like this. It does everything this system was supposed to do, and it winds up looking like this. It's a primary loop. It's a loop of plumbing with two T's taking heat away and pulling heat in, and a solar heat exchanger somewhere in the loop that delivers solar heat into the loop. So literally, these two plumbing photographs literally do the same thing. They both have 4 pumps. The 4 pumps do the same jobs. One pumps the boiler, one pumps the DHW, one pumps the floors, and one pumps the upstairs baseboard, hot water baseboards. And then there's a pump for the solar. Okay, they all have the same number of pumps. They all are designed to do the same thing: heat the floor, heat the water tank, heat the hot water boiler, the hot water baseboards. But one is a nightmare and the other one is super clean and easy. Okay, the new standard makes it super clean and easy, plug and play. And if you follow the new standard, then all of a sudden the controls are already done for you. If you follow this standard, you don't have to reinvent the controls. The controls come in a package for you, and they're guaranteed to work together. So here's what the controls look like. This is something that's invented, patented, and manufactured here in Santa Fe by Solar Logic here in Santa Fe. And what you see is a computer that controls the whole heating system, little orange relays that are used to turn the pumps on and off, and they're under computer control, so the computer can turn anything in the system on or off through one of those little orange relays. And then down here at the bottom, that's where all the wires come in. So the room thermostats get wired here. All the little temperature sensors that make decisions get wired here at the bottom. All the zone valves, if you have zone valves feeding heat to different zones in the house, they get wired here. And all the pumps get wired right here. So everything to do with heating in the house, everything, every pump, every valve, every sensor is wired to this box. And then the box, through its computer, reads what's going on and makes intelligent decisions to guarantee that your solar heating system will provide the solar heat it's supposed to provide at the highest possible efficiency. So our philosophy when it comes to controls is good hydronic plumbing design. It's useless without good controls. So plumbing and controls must be thought of as the same task, and controls are not an afterthought. Even if you're a good plumber and you decide to do some good plumbing, if you leave the controls till last, the controls will not work right. And that's been our experience over the last 20 years. If you treat the controls as if they're sort of an afterthought after you've done the plumbing, it will not work right. It just won't. So our innovation in this new standard that we're promoting here and that we use ourselves, this new standard that I'm talking about, I've used it over 100 times. I believe 130 different buildings around this region and in 10 different states now have these heating systems in them. They don't all have the intelligent controls because that's fairly new, but I think at least 24 of these standard heating systems now have the new intelligent controls to go with them. So this is not experimental. This is something we do. We cookie cutter out solar heating systems, and when we put them in, according to our standard, they work, and we can guarantee they're going to work right. And we can also watch and verify over the internet. We can verify that they're working right. And here's all the things that the control system does. And if you leave out even one of these things, you're missing the boat. So if you think that you can just put together some plumbing and then add all these control functions to the plumbing, it will be a daunting task for you. I've had one of my most experienced installers up in Colorado mentioned that when he did it himself and he had to buy all the parts and wire them together to do all these functions, that it took him at least 40 hours just to wire the parts together. So the new standard is going to save even a smart installer at least 40 hours of labor. And what you see here is quite a long list of things that really need to be watched over and controlled properly in order to make a solar heating system work well in a building. You really do need to know what the temperatures are in every room, and to control them in 2 stages. You want to let it get a little warmer when it's solar, but not so warm maybe when the boiler is kicking in. So that's called 2-stage thermostat control. You want the domestic hot water heater tank to be prioritized so that it gets solar first and the backup heat second. You want to be able to store heat not only in storage tanks, but also if there's any mass floors, like big concrete floors with heat being delivered into them, you want to control the heat stored in the concrete. And if you take that into account, sometimes you can eliminate the need for big heat storage tanks because all the heat that the collectors can put out can be stored in the concrete thermal heat storage capacity of the floor. This is something that we've pioneered here at Solar Logic in Santa Fe, the heat storage directly in concrete floors, and we have got it down to a system. We can make it work beautifully, and we can eliminate the need for very large water heat storage tanks by using the heat storage in the floor. This is actually done all the time in passive solar buildings. The heat shines in a passive solar building and the heat is absorbed by the concrete floors and the adobe walls. Well, we're doing this actively now. We're delivering heat to the concrete floors and controlling the heat storage in the floors to be a comfort temperature. You can also use the same heat with 2 pipes connected to a swimming pool, with 2 more pipes connected to a spa, and control those so that they get solar first and backup heat second. You can do ice melting the same way, solar first, backup heat second. You can do, you need to control this, what's known as the instant hot water recirculator. And the control that Solar Logic makes has a very precise control to control the instant hot water. And we control it 5 different ways. But just quickly, if you don't control the instant hot water heat delivery pump, the pump that pumps heat out of your water heater over to your faucet so that you have instant hot water come out of your faucet, if you do not control that properly, it will suck all the heat out of your hot water tank, and all the solar heat will be lost as waste heat going to your faucets in just a few hours every night. So this is a way of making the solar work better by controlling the instant hot water pump. And it's something that most solar controllers don't even think about, don't even mention, but it's super important. You can lose all of the heat in your solar hot water tank in just a few hours if your instant water pump is out of control. Solar overheat controls, this is really important because in the summer and fall, solar hot heat collectors can produce more heat than you need. And they can get too hot, and when they get super hot, they can boil and make steam and cause other kinds of trouble, high pressure and melting things that are when they get too hot. So overheat control has to be built in. Night sky radiant cooling is something that we now build into every control system, and right now nobody else does that in the world. Only we do that here in Santa Fe. And BTU energy metering, we started out thinking that this is sort of an extra thing that people might want or not want, but we've decided that this is super critical. If you can't measure how much energy is going from your collectors into your house and monitor it somehow with a meter it just the way you meter your electricity, then how do you know that you're getting what you paid for out of your solar heat collectors? How could you possibly know how well it's working unless you measure it? So now our control system has built in, whether you like it or not, it has data logging. It records everything that it does so that one way or another you can display how much heat came from where and went to where. And also we provide BTU energy measurement in a standard way, which we can then display as if it's a dashboard display for the heating system. Let's see. I seem to have, there we go. All right. And then the last part of this is why are we building this heating system? We're building it for the comfort of the occupants of the building. If the people in the building aren't, first of all, thermally comfortable, like not too hot, not too cold, and then psychologically comfortable or technologically comfortable, like they're not overwhelmed by the technology to make their heating system work, that's the idea. This system is to make people in the building comfortable, and we don't want to force people who are not computer savvy or interested in computers to look at a computer to control their system. So we, with all of our control systems, our Solar Logic control systems, we provide ordinary looking room thermostats that work with a knob that you turn. That's really all you need to know to use a Solar Logic heating system. If you can turn the knob up and down, you can keep yourself comfortable, with or without the computer, with or without the internet. But if you're into the internet, like the engineers at Solar Logic can watch over your system, the installer that installed it can watch over your system for you if you're not into it. But usually there's somebody in the house that's into watching over their computer network. And for that person, here's how it works. You have your local area network, that's your local network in your house, and either wirelessly or with a wire, you can talk to the computers in your house. And usually with a wire, you also plug into that network to the control system that's made by Solar Logic. It's called the SLIC controller. It stands for Solar Logic Integrated Controller, SLIC. So the controller is down here controlling the heating system in your house. It has a computer in it that talks to your local network. You can watch it in real time, and you can also watch the history of it. What did it do yesterday, last week, or last year over your local computer. But then also your service guy, your installer, or the engineers at Solar Logic can also watch over it for you through the internet to any remote computer that has the right software and the right password on it. This is all password protected and it's all secure. It's just about as secure as a bank ATM machine is secure over the internet. So you need the right software and the right password to access it. But when you buy a control system like this, you get the software and you get a password. So this is a new innovation in solar heated buildings, especially the smaller solar heated buildings never used to have anything like this. And that is continuous data monitoring, continuous metering and energy display. By the way, that metering and energy display is just like a dashboard on a hybrid car. I mean, you're watching where's the energy coming from, where's the energy going, basically what's the gas mileage of my house. Remote monitoring and text alerts. Yeah, it's a computer that can send out text messages. So when something goes wrong and something needs attention, it will send you a text message. And at Solar Logic, we get all the text messages, so we can sort through and decide which ones are important and which ones are not. And also, it allows complete remote control. So if this is a vacation home and you want to turn the heat up or down from a remote location, you can do that. But keep in mind that it's a heating system with a heating system control. So all of this internet stuff makes it more accessible. But without the internet, let's say the internet goes down or your house gets disconnected from the internet, what happens? The heating system keeps on running just fine. It works without the internet, and it works with those room thermostats. But the internet just makes it more accessible and better in many ways. So let's talk about overheat prevention, because that's something that almost always comes up when you discuss solar heating a house. You know, what happens to the solar collectors in summer and fall when I don't need heat in my house and the collectors are super hot? What happens? Well, there's 7 different ways that I've listed here that are commonly used to prevent overheating in solar collectors. Some of them, like the first one, is not recommended. That's sort of a last resort, where you put all the heat into a domestic hot water tank and it gets so hot that the pressure relief valve blows off. Well, yeah, that's an overheat protection because cold water comes into the tank to cool it, but you've just lost a lot of water down the drain. So not recommended. But the rest of these things are used all the time in different heating systems. There's something called steam back, where you actually allow the liquid in the collector to steam, and it turns to steam and it goes into an oversized expansion tank and sits in the tank until sunset, and then the steam condenses and the liquid comes out of the tank. That's called steam back. It's not. I don't recommend using steam back as the overheat of last resort, because it does allow steam to boil in your collectors, and that actually boils the antifreeze in your collectors. And the more you boil your antifreeze, the older it gets, the more it ages, and the more acidic it becomes. So steam back I consider to be okay as a last resort. If everything else goes wrong, steam back's okay as a last resort. But here's a better one, night circulation. You can put all the extra heat into a storage tank, make that tank get really hot but not hot enough to blow off, and then at night, if your controller is smart enough, it's intelligent enough to know that the storage tank's hotter than normal, it'll run the collectors and the storage tank pump at night, pulling heat out of the tank, sending it back to the collectors at night, and radiating it away from the collectors to the night sky. So we're using night sky radiant cooling to cool an overheated tank. under control so nothing bad ever happens. No steam is ever generated. No blow-off valves ever blow off. So that's good. That's built into our controller. You can use that if you want it. Another way that system designers can design at the beginning of a project is shading or tilting. You can put an overhang that casts a shadow over the collector, or tilt the collector so that it doesn't face the summer sun. But that's something you can only do it at the beginning, and you can only do it once. I mean, it's not something you can change after the collectors are installed, but it's good to think about when you're designing a system. Active heat dumping into the ground, that's used a lot by solar professionals, where the controller senses that the collectors are too hot, turns on the collector pump, pumps the heat out and into an ice melt zone or into the floor of the garage, somewhere where it won't cause any trouble. That is used a lot, and that's built into our control system. OEM means original equipment manufacturers. Some of them build cooling systems into their collectors. There's two collector manufacturers I can think of that actually have what they call thermal disconnects or cooling systems that kick in when the collector gets too hot. These are pretty unusual. You don't find them built into collectors usually. And then the one I like the best, which is something, it's a technology that's been used for many decades, but only a little bit, and we've been resurrecting it because it works so well, and it's called thermosiphon self-cooling. And here's how that works. You have a big bank of solar collectors. Here's a bank that's in Pecos, New Mexico, standing on the ground on top of a hill. We had to put glycol in this system because the collectors are 200 feet away from the house. We had to pressurize the glycol to get it out there and so that it wouldn't freeze. So we've got glycol in these collectors. What happens in this remote location in Pecos when there's a power failure? What if you can't pump the heat out of those collectors during a sunny afternoon and there's a power failure? Well, the answer is self-cooling fins. So normally the pump, during normal operation, you would pump into the bottom corner, pump the glycol through the collectors until it was hot, and it comes out the top and back down to the house. That's normally when the pump is on. Well, when the pump is off, let's say during a power failure, where will the heat go? First, the liquid in the collectors will rise by natural convection because as it gets hotter, heated by the sun, it becomes less dense, tends to expand and rise. So the hottest fluid starts rising and builds up in this header at the top of the collectors. It can't go out where the pump would pump it because the pump's not running. So where does it go? Well, we've added a connection to the opposite corner over here. So it has to go out the opposite corner, and what's waiting for it at this corner? Cooling fins. So it rises, pushes itself into the cooling fins, and the cooling fins start giving off its heat to the air. It cools, becomes more dense, and drops. And it drops down to the opposite corner and goes back into the collector to get heated again and cooled again. So it's a closed loop thermosiphon self-cooling system. Here's the back of the collectors, just to make this more clear. It comes out of the top when it's not being pumped, rises by natural convection, slides into these fins. The fins give the heat off to the air. The cooler liquid becomes more dense and drops by gravity down the pipe because the pipe is tilted. So it slides downhill because it's dense and heavier fluid. And then it reaches this other end where it goes back into the bottoms of the collectors. And there's only one other trick involved with this, and that is you need to place a swing check valve right before it goes back into the bottom of the collectors. Why? So that when the pump turns on, the pump snaps the swing check valve shut and the flow through the cooling fins is blocked. So the pump shuts off the cooling fins when it's on, and the sun turns on the cooling fins when the pump is off. And that is the most reliable cooling system for glycol-filled collectors ever, because it works only when there's a power failure, when there's no power to the pump. That's what we mean by self-cooling fins. And we're not just blowing warm air here. We test everything we do. And we're only telling you about the stuff that works and we know it works because we've done it over and over again and watched it work. And this is just proof that one day, by remote control, we turned off somebody's solar pump on a bright sunny day and we watched what happened over the internet, and then we graphed it. And what happened is we turned the pump off, the collector at the hot pipe where it comes out into the fins got hotter and hotter and hotter, and all of a sudden the balance between the hot fluid and the cold fluid shifted just enough to pop open that swing check valve, and it started cooling itself, flowing down through the fins, cooling itself, and finally reaching kind of an equilibrium right here at about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And in terms of hot antifreeze, 210 degrees Fahrenheit is cool. It's cool enough to keep the antifreeze happy. It will not cook the antifreeze, it will not make it acidic, it will not age the antifreeze at that temperature. So we're a success. We can turn off the power and the collectors will cool themselves at any moment. Here's another innovation that we build into our solar heat control systems these days, and it's called night sky radiant cooling, as I already mentioned. And here's a quick diagram of how it works. You can either put special cooling plates on the roof like we did at the Los Alamos ecosystem, and that's what we're showing here. Or you can just use the collectors that you have. The big collectors standing on the hill in Pecos, you can pump those at night and they will provide cooling. But anyway, here's how it works. You wait at night until the night is clear enough so that the plate temperature on this collector, the black surface on the collector, radiates away its heat to the night sky, and it radiates it so much faster than the air can reheat it that the temperature of the surface of the metal plummets. And you've probably seen this effect on the surface of your car hood or the top of your car. In the morning you come out and there's frost or dew all over your car, but nowhere else. Why is that? It's because your car was facing the night sky. The metal got so cold that it made dew condense out of the air, way colder than the air temperature. And that's what happens here with night sky radiant cooling, especially in this climate. On a clear night, you can expect the plate temperature to be much colder than the air temperature. And when the plate temperature drops to a nice cooling temperature, you can pump fluid through it and cool the fluid and pump that cool fluid through your floors. You can do it all night for about 10 hours of cooling your floors if you want to. And then your floors are much cooler than normal the next day. And in summer, you wake up and you've got cool floors, and those cool floors, if they're concrete floors, will coast into the day, long into the daylight hours, staying much cooler than normal. And so we're pre-cooling the mass of the house using solar collector technology. And we're doing it with essentially the same collectors and the same pumps you had to have there anyway. We're just running them at night under a different kind of control. Here's some examples. Like I said, we've done this more than once, and we've monitored them. Out in Canyoncito, we're using glazed collectors and cooling the floors just with the ordinary collectors. Up in Taos, in this particular instance, we're using swimming pool collectors that have no glazing, and cooling the floors in this building. This is a small commercial building, at night using these blank collectors with no glass covers. There's a formula here for people who like formulas, where you can take the air temperature, the dew temperature, and some other things and multiply and add and actually predict how much cooling you're going to get. So you can actually design this by the numbers if you want to. And here's some designing by the numbers that I did, just to try to estimate how much cooling can I get in Denver. I can get this much. How much can I get in Los Angeles? Oh, I can get that much in the middle of summer. Can I get any cooling in Miami where it's really hot and humid? No, it's down to 0 in Miami. So radiant cooling isn't going to work in Miami, but it will work in Los Angeles, it will work in Denver, and it will work, oddly enough, in New York City. It doesn't go to 0 in New York. So radiant night sky cooling, nobody knows about it, but it's just waiting to be used to offset your air conditioner load. Simply by running a pump at night, you can get cooling. Okay. And here's 6 things you need to know about radiant cooling. Flat plate panels can be used for cooling. It's not high tech. You just turn on a pump. It makes good use of components you already have. If you already have a solar heating system, you're just using the same equipment, but you're running it at night instead of during the day. It's not so much like air conditioning as it is like what's known as an economizer cycle. Air conditioning makes chilly air blow around, and that's not what we're doing here. We're putting chilled liquid into the mass of your house and chilling the surfaces of your house. And we're only doing it at night, and when you only chill at night when it's available, that's known in the air conditioner world as an economizer cycle. It can be used in non-desert locations. Sure, it works great in deserts where the skies are clear. It works great when the skies are clear. But it also works to some extent even when it's partly cloudy in other locations, not the desert. And there's some real efficiency advantages. And one of the best advantages is that the amount of energy it takes to run that pump at night is about 3 to 6 times less energy than an air conditioner would use to do the same job. So it's way more electrically efficient. And here's a little quick case study of that Los Alamos Eco Station where they have cooling panels on the roof, heating panels on the wall, and here's the primary loop system that they have that allows heating, cooling, boiler, domestic hot water, and floor heating all hanging on the wall right there in the standard way where things are plugged together with 2 pipes. It's a little hard to see on this piping photograph, but it's all there and it's all done to the standard. And we do have a slick control system that we can do by remote control on the Los Alamos Eco Station. And I tapped in here just last week. Or no, just a month ago I did this. I looked at the EcoStation dashboard and I took a screen grab and here it is. And what I'm looking at is this is how much solar heat came into the building. We measured it with a BTU meter month by month for the year 2013. So here's January, February, March, April, etc. So it was on the order in the winter, it was on the order of 5 million BTUs per month of solar heat delivered to the building. And in the summer, of course, it pretty much shut down except for the heat we needed to heat the domestic hot water tanks. But also, the same year, we monitored how much cooling came out of those big black radiators on the roof. And here it is in BTUs, month by month during the hot season. We actually measured the cooling coming from those panels. And it's on the order, the highest value here is up around 2 million BTUs per month of cooling delivered to the building. So not only are we using pretty unconventional means to do heating and cooling, we're measuring it and we're proving that it's working. And the same kind of plug and play can be done with other sources of heat. Here's a system we did at a fish farm in Colorado where they're heating it with a big wood boiler where you stoke this with wood and you heat the water that way. We plug that right into our system and we control it the same way we control any other source of heat. Here's one that was done with a ground source heat pump. We have a ground source heat pump like this, exactly like this in fact, in a house in Alaska that we watch all the time, where the heat pump is actually pulling heat out of the ground and heating the house with ambient heat from the ground. And our control system just controls that like it was any other heat source. It's no big deal. You plug it in with 2 pipes and you send the ground source heat pump heat around to the house. So you can, any source of heat you can think of, like this engine generator. This is a generator that generates electricity for an off-grid house. We added a heat exchanger to it and a pump, and whenever the engine generator turns on, we suck heat out of its radiator and pump it into the house and to anything that needs it in the house. So that increases the efficiency of the fuel burned in that generator by an enormous amount. What did we figure, Fred? by a factor of 3. So for every unit of energy burned in this generator that we used to burn just to make electricity, now we get 3 units out of it for electricity and heat. One unit of electricity and 2 units of heat for every hour that generator is running. So, so anybody with excess heat from any source for any reason, you can hook it up like this to our system with 2 pipes and we can control it. So it opens up a whole new world of renewable energy. You can just find renewable energy wherever it is, connect it with 2 pipes and control it in a very intelligent way. And not only that, you can watch it work. You can prove that it's working. And if it's not working the way you want, by remote control, you can adjust it. And so here's the piping diagram that goes with that engine generator. You see, you just plug the engine generator in with a heat exchanger with 2 pipes. Here's the 2 pipes. And away you go around the loop. You can give that heat to anything that needs it. So I'm going to end with what I call the prime directive. The prime directive for we mechanical engineers that design renewable energy heating systems is it must be an upgrade. If you're going to bother doing renewable energy heating, it better be better than anything else the homeowner was considering. Really, it must not only be better, but it must feel better to the homeowner. And that is what we've got with the new standard way we do things, where we plug things in and make it, and we know it's going to work because it plugs in the same way every single time. And because it plugs in the same way every single time, we know we can control it because we control it the same way every single time. And it's super smart and computer controlled and remote control, and it's got all those bells and whistles that people that carry smartphones love. So it's got to be an upgrade, and the new standard is. So I'm going to end my presentation with that and open up to questions.
You stated that you could use it in a metropolitan cities such as New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and it works with no difficulties. So
That's right. That's right. The question is, can you use this in like big cities like New York, Chicago? I already pointed out LA and Denver are fair game. And yes, the cooling part will work to some degree in all of those locations. The heating part will work even better because all of those locations have plenty of solar, enough solar to make the heating part work just fine. So the thing is, you design in Chicago or New York, you design a solar heating system for the building that you're talking about, and then you'd use the cooling part to whatever it could do because it's practically free. Once you put in the solar part, the solar heating part, the cooling part's practically free. You can use it. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll bring this little talk to a close. Thank you very much.